Now, we also saw Nigeria's central bank keeping its benchmark interest rate at about 14% today after the economy contracted yet again in the first quarter. Governor Godwin Emefiele says the bank's Monetary Policy Committee has voted to retain the headline rate. Well, joining us with more insight in Lagos is Deji Badmus. Deji, welcome to the show. Now, Deji, despite the fact that we saw growth rates remain below the CBN's targets, we also saw lower inflation and a more stable foreign exchange market this time around. Should we have seen a policy change this time around? And suddenly, what were the reasons behind today's decisions?
Well, the CBN governor actually explained that. You're quite right. A lot of people had, quite a number of people actually had expected that we were going to see probably some kind of, that the CBN was going to loosen its stance and, adopt a more liberal approach. But that did not happen. The MPC voting unanimously, all the 8 members that attended the MPC meeting now voting unanimously to keep rates at the same, at the way they are. And the CBN governor actually explained the reason for that. First, in terms of inflation, you're right, inflation is coming down, but of course, it is still very high at over 17%. And the central bank governor did say that it's still very high, that it has not come down to the level that the central bank has set for itself, somewhere around 12%. So inflation is still coming down. It's still high at the moment. Of course, there's some stability in the foreign exchange market. You're quite right. But then we should not forget that the central bank keeps pumping forex into that market. And that's the reason why you have that stability, so to speak. So the foreign portfolio investors, for instance, that the CBN expects will come to take advantage, for instance, of the high interest rate, they are still not coming in droves. So the central bank governor says there's every need to allow these policies that the CBN has actually pushed out there to gain traction, to actually help, to take root, so that the CBN can actually achieve its target and objectives, and that it just would not be very helpful to actually change the rates at the moment. That, as a matter of fact, if that was done, it could actually have some negative impact on inflation, and then it could also have a negative impact as well on even interest rates as well.
Now, Deji, in terms of some of the other MPC rates, analysts were certainly expecting to see them reduce the cash reserve ratio by some 250 basis points, of course, to ease liquidity pressures on Nigerian banks. Now, what are your thoughts on that decision this time around?
Well, the CBN governor did explain that it is quite true that there's the need, for instance, to ease liquidity, to let the banks actually have more liquidity, but that, when you consider the fact that very soon you'll have fiscal injections. Don't forget, you have the 2017 budget. Very soon that budget will be signed into law, and money will be coming in. So the MPC reasoning is that, well, you are going to have fiscal injections, and that fiscal injection will definitely create liquidity now for the banks. As a matter of fact, the CBN governor said at some point the MPC actually debated whether to tighten at this point, in anticipation of the fiscal injection, of course, that we're all expecting from the budget. But of course, he said the MPC eventually overruled that, saying, well, it might not be helpful for the bank, but that the most important thing is that at this point in time, easing liquidity at this point may not be helpful at all, and that, just as I said the other time, he said that could have a negative impact on inflation. It could destroy the inflation rate that is coming down now. That if inflation rate, for instance, had come down to, say, somewhere as low as 13%, then the MPC could be thinking about that. But for now, it just would make sense to allow things remain the way they are and see the level to which inflation will come down to, maybe in a couple of months.
Now, in terms of the CBN's outlook going forward, the IMF certainly is forecasting growth of about 0.8% this year. The World Bank forecasts 1.2%. Now, given the fundamentals, is the central bank, is the MPC confident about the global and local fundamentals?
Absolutely. I mean, the central bank governor did say that the MPC is actually confident that the economy will rebound. Even before the MPC meeting took place, a couple of weeks ago, the central bank governor, after meeting with the Senate president, came out to tell journalists that he was absolutely sure that the economy was going to come out of recession by probably the third quarter of this year. That, I think, is a reasoning of the MPC. For instance, the GDP rate that was released by the the National Bureau of Statistics, the MPC did talk about that yes, it is true, the contraction is marginal, but that you also have to look at the positive sides, that because we're able to see that there are growths in quite a number of sectors, about 18 sectors as a matter of fact. So the CBN governor made it quite clear that all those are clear pointers that the economy is making progress and that Nigeria is gradually creeping out of recession, and pretty confident too that, of course, globally, they said, well, if things stay the way they are, especially in the United States of America, if you do not have some kind of adjustments there, then there's every reason for Nigeria not to worry at all. And of course, they did talk about the oil price, that the hope is that the price of oil will continue to remain the same. They did express the fear that shale production in the U.S. could go up and that could affect prices. But the general outlook is positive. They are pretty positive and confident that things will improve and that eventually the economy will get better and come out of recession, Uche.
Well, many thanks, Deji, for those insights. Deji Badmus joining us there in Lagos. Now